All right, so everyone, thank you for joining me with a special interview with Riley Jimison of Riley's Reptiles. As some of you may have been aware, Riley was with us on some of our earliest panel forums when this channel was new and has helped me along the way with husbandry and breeding information. This time, we've chosen not to have an entire panel and instead just have Riley on to talk about carpet pythons. They're certainly not the only species of snake Riley keeps and breeds, but they're a prime feature of his YouTube page, and he's certainly a breeder worth knowing if you're ever considering one of these snakes for a breeding project or as a pet. Personally, I find that when we ask questions on platforms like YouTube or Facebook, the number of responses can be overwhelming. Sometimes you'll get various responses on how to do something properly, and sometimes you'll get wildly inaccurate information. And so I'm a big advocate of getting advice from one person at a time, and that's what this is. So here we are. Welcome, Riley.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Nice
Yeah,
to nice to chat with you again.
yeah, it's good to catch up. It's been about a year or two, so it's funny how time flies like that.
Yeah,
Let's jump in. So Riley's Reptiles really seems to be a growing operation. Congratulations.
thank you.
It's been featured on several highly watched YouTube channels. You've produced hundreds, probably thousands of reptiles, and vended shows across California and now to a few other states as well. But you probably won't sell a snake to everyone who buys one this season, right? So besides just messaging you, how would you advise someone, and they should message you, but how would you advise someone to find a good breeder of carpet pythons?
I think if you know that there's somebody who you can reach out to, if it's not myself, and just message them, and if you feel like they're comfortable and you're comfortable, kind of getting a lay of the land. If you're new to the sort of the landscape of who breeds, that's always a good start. Just keep everything in mind that they might have their own personal biases and experiences that would weigh their sort of opinions, and just take everything with a grain of salt. But there's a lot of people out there. Morph Market is a great place. You can kind of look up people's profiles. You can go on Facebook, and there are groups devoted to species specific sections like carpet pythons, and you can sort of see who's talking a lot in there, and people ask questions about that sort of very same sort of deal every once in a
Like who's a
while.
who's a good breeder and that sort of thing?
But yeah, or like somebody might have a specific, animal in mind. They might be like, who should I go to for an inland carpet, or who should I go to for
Mhm.
Brettles, or who's got, double het axanthic granites right now, or whatever it is. Um, and some of those groups can be sort of like a quick, easy way to get at least a jumping off point. Just take everything that's said with a grain of salt. There's a lot of opinions in groups.
Hmm.
Um,
You
and
you
then
so
you,
you
yeah,
you brought that up a couple times too. So when you mentioned breeders and people in groups, you mentioned that there's a lot of opinions. And
sure.
I think we've actually talked about this on this channel specifically in the past, but I can't remember. But how do you navigate that? So I know at this point you're not searching for a lot of advice for sort of basic conditions, right? You've had a bit of experience, but at one point you were, and you understand how it works. How would you suggest someone sort of what's the word I'm looking for? But when they amalgamate everything together, because there is a lot of different points of view and stances on how the best way to do it, and all you need is this versus all you need is that. You know what I mean? So what?
Mhm.
How do you walk the line with all those opinions out there? What's the way that you would approach that or recommend someone approach that?
I think in my earlier years, I looked at it like I wanted to know everybody's opinion on everything that I could find. So I listened to every sort of podcast, read as many posts as possible. As far as like, if I was hungry for carpet python knowledge, and, let's say we're going back a decade or so, I'm still sort of getting my feet wet. I'm I'm paying attention to who's speaking up a lot, who's got a lot of things to say, but I'll also listen to any opinion at
Hmm.
that point. And I think a smart keeper would do well to listen to as many points of opinion and perspective as possible, and then just understand that it is exactly that, a spectrum of opinions and approaches, and that you can sort of take a little bit of everybody's approach or beliefs and morph that into sort of what you call your approach to husbandry. And it's okay for that to change and evolve over time as well. Um, I think I sort of started by like listening to the people who I looked up to a lot, and
Hmm.
then blended a lot of, their approaches to husbandry, and then just took it from there. And then along the way, if I would, discover people or come across people on podcasts online and or wherever, recommendations from friends, I think it's always great to listen to what they have to say and think about how they accomplish maybe some of the more easy tasks, just because sometimes they might live somewhere entirely different. And so they have to approach, humidity
Hmm.
or lighting different, or, whatever it may be. It's a different variable. And you never know what sort of creative ideas you'll get out of another person's approach. Um, so I really made sure I kind of absorbed as much as possible coming into it, and now I definitely am not as active in, like seeking out information within the carpet python realm, so to speak. Um, if there's new stuff going on, or people are publishing new stuff, I'll definitely take note. But otherwise, these days very much just kind of trying to stick to myself and progress where I can, and ideally, take this to the next level, and improve within my own realms as many times as often as possible, because the idea is there's always room for improvement. Um, just trying to grow. And yeah, I think for somebody coming into it, you could really you could get lost in the weeds easily.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but nowadays we're kind of in a golden era of reptiles. There's or reptile keeping. Um, YouTube
It
is
feels that way a lot.
it really does. YouTube is in our pocket, and there's so many wonderful examples of people that are just giving you a visual demonstration of how they accomplish the goal you might be looking to accomplish. And so, as cliche as it sounds, it's a great tool and a wonderful resource, and there's a lot of awesome people out there. Facebook groups can be a great tool, a great launching point to introduce yourself to a community, and then you branch out from there.
Mhm.
As long as I think it's a healthy practice for everybody to sort of just maintain an open mind, and every once in a while just self-reflect and be like, okay, am I repeating dogma, or am I sort of like, do I believe what I'm saying? Am I actively thinking and practicing what I'm preaching, and being open-minded? Because I definitely think my approach to keeping day one changed from year five, from year 10, from now, and there's a lot more changes I want to make in the future as well. So as long as you're always, um, you know, double checking yourself that you're doing okay by your animals, and just paying attention to anything that comes out that might be relevant, just don't close any doors. I think that's the biggest thing. Don't close doors, stay open minded, and
Yeah,
don't be afraid to ask questions.
I love that. Yeah, it's there's a lot to learn for everyone, and I think taking a mindset of, oh, that's right. How can that, how can I use the right information I gathered in this, as opposed to what all do I not agree with and what all is wrong here? There's
Mhm.
two different mindsets you can have, and I think assuming that the person that even if the advice was given was not what you were hoping for, or not something you could even implement, right, you can put it into place. um
Sure.
but that's thank you for diving in on that. That was something that I know has come up before, and it was kind of off the topic, but we were talking about selling, finding breeders and that sort of thing, and it's really I think that's a great point too, because you can really, there's a lot of personalities involved with buying snakes, and frankly you can find um, someone that you want to seek out advice from in the future. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it's an interesting thing out there, the marketplace for reptile breeders. But
Sure.
what about platforms like Morph Market and Palm Street. Have you sold snakes on Palm Street yet?
Yeah, yeah, I have. I've used it a little bit, not a ton. It sounds like a lot when you say you produced 125 snakes, but it isn't when you're selling 12 months out of the year.
Yeah.
And you're selling on multiple platforms. So I have done a little bit on there, but um, yeah, it's a lot of fun. You reach a lot of different audiences the more platforms you get on. You meet more people, and you just never know what you're going to learn because everybody does a little bit different. But yeah, I use Palm Street, I use Morph Market, I use my website. Yeah, I see everything as a tool. It's all the tools that you want to throw in your toolbox, and yeah, just try it all. If it's successful, use it.
Cool. What was uh, can you explain Palm Street how it works? Because Morph Market, I think,
Yeah,
is people are pretty familiar with the model,
yeah.
but Palm Street, I think there's a lot of myth and that sort of thing. And I've never, frankly, used it, so I'm genuinely asking
Yeah,
what that's
it's
like.
it's it's basically live stream hangout, and then people sell stuff while you're hanging out. And within the app, you can sort of have like a profile off the side with little buttons that people can click, where you have a shop, where you have things that are always for sale or stuff up for
Uh,
auction, and people can chat and directly communicate with the seller and say, "Hey, can you run the auction for whatever item is in there, or do you have any of this?" And so, like, say you're looking for a lily white crested gecko, for example, you
mhm.
go in there, you hit the reptiles section, and then you see who's streaming, and then you can scroll down and see who's got a scheduled stream for, however far out, the next day, couple days, and you can just pop on and see if they're um, selling animals or just doing educational sort of discussions. There's a lot of people who do both.
Mm.
They'll show off animals, just talk, hang out, especially like social media profiles that have, maybe a diverse array of animals. They might, do a walkthrough of their reptile room or something like that, and use that to promote their YouTube or other merch or things like that. Breeders can use it for selling animals. Hard good vendors can use it for selling stuff, isopods, cork, frogs, geckos, snakes, you name it. I mean, it's basically just a live streaming um, auction and for sale platform, because you can have sort of like a default shop going at any given time where people
Okay.
can just purchase stuff right then and there. Yeah.
Cool.
So,
Cool. Cool.
yeah, it's just a different format. It's a little bit more interactive. It's a little bit more face to face, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might
Has
not
it?
see the buyer, but the buyer gets to see you and the animal, and so there's a little bit more of a bridging that gap between buyer and seller in that regard.
Yeah, a little bit kind of like a marketplace. Like I hate to say reptile expos came to mind because I don't like the idea of like
Hmm.
digital expos, but like reptile expos, right? Like it's
Sure.
kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, dope. What if you were looking to buy a carpet python, what sort of questions would you ask a breeder before buying? What would you be checking? What are good questions to look for?
As a well-informed and educated buyer, I would want to know, one, who produced it if it's not you as the seller. Do you have photos of the parents? Can you provide any lineage? How much is it eaten? Hatch date? That sort of stuff. I personally don't care too much about their behavior, whether they're defensive or bitey. That doesn't really deter me one way or the other.
Hmm.
I'm fine with a young animal that has a spicy attitude, because that definitely changes as they age.
And I
So,
could tell you, I have the neonate rainbow boas right now, and like
mhm,
the ones that are not spicy terrify me because if everyone else I think is sick and dying, and it's
sure.
like at least the ones that are biting, I'm like, okay, good, you're doing
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It's a
Yeah,
it's a sign of vigor and health.
a little bit,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I'm not one to ask about their behavior. I'll never ask how's their behavior. I don't really care.
yeah,
I don't mind if people ask me as a seller. I'll
yeah.
happily give whatever information you're seeking if I can. Um, but yeah, I just want to, I want to know, like, if it's a baby, obviously, did you produce it or not? I want to know if it's changed hands, at all, or if so, how many times?
Hmm.
What, what's it eating? Live, frozen, thawed? I can usually figure it out, but just to cut some of the guesswork out of that in the first week or two. And then yeah, I'm pretty confident in my ability to bring on a new carpet python and sort of set it up and go for it. But if somebody were, let's say if somebody weren't experienced, and this was their first carpet python,
Yeah,
um,
totally. Thank you.
I would advise them to ask a breeder if they're communicating directly with a breeder, how do they have them set up? Are they running them in like a tub rack system, sort of like economy style, or do they have the luxury of setting them up in like exoterras or something bigger? Because oftentimes the transition from breeder to new household, if you can make the variables as similar as possible, the transition is as seamless as possible. Not always, but sometimes it just helps. Um, and then yeah, we went over asking about feeding. Um, and then yeah, I personally like to know lineage wherever possible. Photos of parents, as much information behind those animals as possible is going to add value for me personally, but that doesn't necessarily um, mean that an animal is worth less if it doesn't have that. If it's a beautiful animal, it can still be an undocumented animal. You can sort of get the background from it and just say like, oh, it was from a one pet household, or it was
Right.
imported in the 90s, and that's all we know, or whatever it is. So yeah.
Right, because there's some fairly niche markets for carpet pythons. I mean, there's localities and specific lines. Um, there's morphs, and then there's a lot of play with hybrids, right? Like sort of
Hmm.
or crosses.
Hmm.
So like this next question is probably pretty loaded, but like, what is the expected price range for a carpet python? Like, because it could go probably pretty high, right? But is it also pretty
Sure.
accessible?
Yeah, I would say like on the low end, you could probably get a carpet for like 200 bucks, 175, somewhere in that range.
And
150,
what
175.
kind of snake would that be? Like, is it just an animal that doesn't have specific lineage tract? Is it
Um,
likely a mix of things, or
Not necessarily. There are carpet pythons that breed in larger quantities that are more abundant, easy to get established, have been around for a long time, and maybe aren't necessarily the latest craze.
Mhm.
And you can get, your average coastal carpet python that isn't like a specific locality or more for probably 150 to 200 bucks.
Right?
I think that's absolutely reasonable expectation for like somebody that wants to get a pure coastal, just like a nondescript, you know, just whatever, it could even be a posset axanthic, or, have some striping to it or whatever. But yeah, but then you can probably go as high as, I think lately I've seen upwards of like 8K, because we're starting to hit the time where people are hitting like triple recessives, and there's
Hmm.
only like a handful of people producing them at most, or, like brand new double recessive hybrid crosses that like only folks in Australia have pulled off visuals for, things like that. So you're starting to see the ceiling rise a little bit on some of those prices as time goes on, people
Mm.
getting into like multiple generations of pure locality stuff, or there are certain like lineages that have maybe become more scarce over time, therefore warranting a higher price tag, or localities in the same vein. So yeah, the ceiling's going up, and I've seen yeah, just shy of like 10 grand, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty wild. Yeah, I'm used to the era where the most expensive carpet python I saw was like four, maybe 5K, or a pair was like 5K of something really new. But times have changed and the world's more expensive. Rodents are expensive.
Mm.
Space is at a premium. Electric has gone up. Like I get it, is what it is.
Yeah, it's expensive to breed snakes. It's there's no way around that.
Oh yeah.
How big would a coastal carpet python get?
I mean, you can. you can expect most of them to be in the 5 to 7 foot range. You're
Right.
going to see and hear that, oh, there's this one at my pet store, or my buddy has one that's 8, 9 feet, maybe 10 feet, and they're not lying. But that is more the exception to the rule, and that's usually like an older animal that is well over 10 years old or something that's just been fed excessively. Um, I have 8-year-old females that are under 7 feet. Um, my males, all of them, regardless of age, I don't think ever hit 6 feet.
Mhm.
And that's not for, lack of feeding. Some of them I've fed and they just do not grow beyond that point.
Sure.
Yeah, it just is what it is. Um, but I also used to feed like just kind of mindlessly every week, regardless of season, and just shoot the breeze. And now I implement sort of like a quarterly seasonal adjustment where every 3 months it is a different routine. And most of my animals, I would say 99% of the carpet pythons here get at least 8 to 10 weeks off of food in the winter, with the exception of like, maybe some stragglers that are falling behind, or just getting into the feeding, like some, late hatch Brettles pythons or things like that. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, and
Well,
I've found that plus some like seasonal adjustment, you really curb that overweight, constantly eating, just massive growth, and you still get a good, like well-fed looking animal, but their growth is seems a little more appropriate, I guess.
I think, and it's I don't know. You know what? I'm not a biologist, but I think studying enough natural history that uh, feast and famine seems like the perfect model for feeding snakes, right? Like
Hmm.
it totally makes sense that food comes in certain seasons and is less abundant in others, you know. So
Hmm.
I always like that model, but I was thinking about the size of these pythons, and they're really it's a good size snake. Like it's like I mean, good as in like ideal even. It's not humongous, and but it's also it's a two-handed animal. I think it fits that size that a lot of people,
Yeah,
or like, you know, it's popular. It's not a tiny small animal. There's definitely a space for those too, but
totally.
but it doesn't get huge or out of control. What and
Yeah.
what about the price range on sort of I know not specifically the what is it, Morelia spilota is carpet python, yeah.
Hmm.
So I know that these are separate, but they're kind of adjacent. What about like diamond pythons or rough scale pythons? What sort of price range do we look at for stuff like that? Or I think you've got Bredli and Papuans as well.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of everything. I would say Bredly, because they produce generally good sized clutches, because females tend to mature at like 5 to 7 years, and by that time they're also good size. So it's not unheard of to get 2 dozen plus, eggs in a clutch from an
Oh wow.
average size female. But your average Brettles python, you could expect 2 to 300 bucks, depending on if it's a specific lineage. There are some lines that are less available, like a fours or price line, things like that. But then when you start adding some morphs in there, it also depends on, which there are three mutations. You have stonewashed, you have hypo, and you have genetic stripe. And so there's a little bit of like the quality of the individual, how many of those morphs are in there, and so that will affect the price um, with those guys. But that's more morph driven. With diamonds, you have a reduced pattern diamond morph that exists, and those are still sort of not fully understood as the mode of inheritance. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of people that seem to have a bead on it, but it doesn't quite follow simple Mendelian genetics. It's just kind of weird. Those guys have gone up because they need to get cold in the winter. They're not the easiest to breed, and they don't always have, like if you don't get it just right, and you don't feed a female well enough, and you don't get both the female and the male cool enough, and you didn't do a good enough job raising them up over the early years, slow and steady with cooling at night, you might have some fertility issues early on. I haven't bred them yet, but there are a handful of people who've dialed them in, and they put a lot of work in, and so those tend to run no less than like 1800 dollars for diamond python these days.
Right. Okay.
Rough scales, I would say you're probably finding them priced around 1200 bucks. They're not the hardest python to breed. They don't have the widest gene pool, but there are a decent amount of people producing them in the US and Europe
Yeah.
and Canada. So uh, you can find them. They're like $200 over in Australia. They're that common, but I don't think they'll ever hit that point here. But yeah, right now I'd say around 1200 bucks is average roughy pricing.
Yeah. So long as Australia is not shipping out animals, that's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah.
What about, and that brings me to the carpet python that we do still import, the Papuan carpet pythons. I have to be careful not to say the Papuan pythons, which is what I want to say.
It's an easy slip. It's an easy
Yeah.
slip. I've accidentally said it too. Yeah, Papuan pythons are much bigger. The the Papuan carpets, man, when I got in to Morelia, they were a hard sell at 100 bucks for most vendors that I saw. They were kind of overlooked as just the ugly brown carpet python that nobody cared about. There wasn't
Hmm.
really anything going on. The granite mutation early on was heavily inbred, and so it had, hatching and fertility issues, some darn near like jag-like wobble symptoms in some really extreme cases, and it just kind of turned people off. And then a handful of people, myself included, um, sort of just took advantage of the fact that you could get them for 100 bucks a piece after they've already come into the U.S., and that's after the vendor's markup.
Yeah.
And just a couple generations in, you can really get some crazy colors out of them. We can still export and import them. And nowadays, obviously the price of gas has gone up, the price of just cost of living everywhere across the world, even remote islands, has gone up. And so those trappers and the brokers and everybody, their costs have gone up. And nowadays, I would say, um, I think the last wild caught import I paid like 450 bucks for, or something like that, for an exceptional female, from a top shelf importer slash breeder who takes care of them, very closely vets who his trappers and the people are overseas. So these animals, while in other people's hands, are well cared for. So they're not coming in beat up, dehydrated, and all sorts of stressed out. So I'm happy to pay extra for
Right.
that peace of
It,
mind.
and that's not a lot for and it was
No,
it was it it was it an adult animal or a young animal too, or
I've gotten babies and adults at that price.
right.
It just kind of depends on what's available. You would think that this seemingly like untapped sort of resource for the only accessible, exportable, legal carpet python, there'd be excessive demand, and there just really isn't. And so
Hmm.
when these trappers or exporters say they get a quota assigned one year of, you can bring in 50 of these Papuan carpets, and they don't get the order for 50, and they only bring in 25. Well, next year they're only issued a quota of 25 because the government sees that as wasted quota. You don't need it. There isn't demand for it. So let's protect the wildlife and not even fiddle with that. And I think it takes quite a bit of back and forth and legal work in order to change that quota for the increase. You'd really have to justify that over there. Um, and so it's gotten to the point where there's only a few dozen that come in every year. And there were a couple of years where they weren't coming in. And so their prices have gone up. And then, like anything else, hype and the visualization of potential and new blood and the pervasiveness of that information leads to more demand, therefore increase in price. So
And
it's
I dig them. Like you said, they were brown, but I think there's a lot of reds and yellows and deep colors to them. And the yellows with the brown is a little different. I love young carpets too, especially some of them look blue and white almost.
yeah.
And that they're a very beautiful snake. But um, in my from kind of an outsider's perspective looking in, the Papuan carpets, I think a big thing that they benefit from is they're different. They look slightly different from a
Hmm.
lot of the jungles and the coastals.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not that saturated and strikingly so. Like it's not just
Yeah.
like, oh, it's a different snake, but it's, oh, it catches your eye. So they're
Yeah.
I think they're my favorite.
They age like a fine wine too. Sometimes if you look at a clutch, you'll see the ones that stand out and you can tell which ones are going to be colorful. But actually, I wouldn't say sometimes. I would say all the time. Those darker, less eye-catching, sort of ugly duckling, quote
Yeah.
unquote, out of the bunch, they'll oftentimes blow you away about 3, 4 years down the line. There's just something about these animals and the way their polygenics and phenotype within just the natural wild type look. There's so much potential. I mean, you can get everything in a clutch from something that turns almost solid black to something that glows orange with like, you know, at night it's purple and silver looking. Like it doesn't make any sense. Um, so yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I wish I had more space and money to just have a whole bunch more of them. But in the meantime, I'm as I'm producing them, I'm keeping and amassing an army of them. Like they're just, yeah, like you said, they are my favorite. There's so much potential, and I'll hold a pair back from a clutch per se. Let's say, for example, I've held a pair back from a clutch and then sold the rest over the years. I'll see people post those animals. I'm like, oh, that looks like something I produce. And then I'll double
Hmm.
check, read the comment, and it does, and it is something I produce. And then I'll look at, details and figure out the year, and I'll go back and look at mine, and I'm like, wow, they look nothing alike. And
Yeah.
it's so cool to see. And you can keep an entire clutch, and they all look different. So they're the potential is has yet to be realized, I think, in that taxonomy.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's you hear a lot of times when people talk about breeders and projects and those sort of things, but if you really focus in on the underlying colors, I think of the animals, you could really take it a lot of directions as well,
Oh yeah.
especially when you put it into the specific morphs in those. So um, how fun, how many breeding pair do you have, just out of curiosity,
Oh,
or breeding females, I guess?
breeding female Papuans. Let's see. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. I think eight
Okay.
females that are 4+ years old right now. I think. Yeah, just the Papuans. And then there's one, two, three, four, five, six, uh, 10, 18, 20. Yeah, at least 20 more females coming up.
Oh wow. Okay, nice. So there's a lot of ways you could. How do you even choose which one you want to keep out of so many?
I just
Do you
keep
have a
them all.
system? Yeah,
I
keep them
just
all.
keep them all. At the very least, I can sell them later on down the line if I find myself in a pinch or it didn't work out or didn't, grow up the way I want. Um, Usually I have an idea of what I'm looking for when I'm making a pairing. And at that point, I'm usually set on, okay, I'm going to keep a pair unless there's exceptional individuals that I need to retain as a standout. And I'm
Hmm.
happy to fudge my plan of the 1.1. Um, I did a pairing this year with an F1 male of mine, Red Man, with a sibling female of his that I'd been growing up, and it was a very anticipated pair. I kept them with the plan of doing this in mind, and while she was growing up, I had bred him to a couple other females, and he's definitely shown his potential for passing on great color. So I finally had the point where that female was up to size to make F2s. And yeah, I still have 13 of those 15.
Okay.
Uh,
Nice.
and I sent a pair to Nick, a really nice pair to Nick, and then two of my patrons are getting two females because I know they're just gonna hang on to them, and if they grow up and I want to breed them, they'll let me borrow them. But the rest I'm just gonna keep because they are way beyond what I expected. It's a nice female heavy slightly ratio, and each time they all shed, I'm just like absolutely blown away. Um, and it's just like only one generation beyond what I was seeing, and I'm looking towards like F6s. I want to make F6s, so that's going to be like another 16 to 20 years, right? And I'm
Right.
already seeing crazy examples now, so I'm really excited for the future. I'm gonna have to have a building of straight poplar carpets at this rate. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of doing the economics in my head. I was like, that's a lot of cages. Yeah. So
yeah.
it works out that you could have someone keep it and ask for it back when they raise it up.
Yeah, yeah. The nice thing is these things are this particular clutch is really, really, really nice, and they know that, and um, they're good friends. So it'll be good. But sadly, I've definitely let some snakes get away from me that I've seen photographed come
Uh-huh.
back to me in the end, and I'm just like, oh, why did I let that go? What was I thinking? And so now, my mentality is hold on to it for a little while. At the very least, see how it goes at around 6 months, and that gives me a really good indication for the most part. Um, but yeah, you can't keep everything, so at some point you gotta bless the people, right?
Absolutely. Nice. I like that. Let me ask you this. So let's switch back. Let's gear it towards someone, and it could be we talked about earlier, mixing everyone's opinion. So let's just get
Mhm.
your opinion on what to do, and take out of mind. But do step out of Riley's reptiles and take it back to maybe you're just like a pet keeper and you're keeping one or two.
Okay. Okay.
So if I do buy a baby, think of it, like you said, 6 months old snake. How should I set up its enclosure? What all do I need for a baby?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really good like Zoom It or Exoterra glass front enclosures. If it was me getting a baby, I would go get something in the 10 to 15 gallon range ish loosely. It's nothing too crazy, but I've had customers buy babies and throw them right in 4 footers and they do just fine. But just to grow into it, let's say for you're not trying to blow a huge wad financially on a massive cage at first. I
Yeah.
would say if you go get yourself like a 10, 15 gallon Exoterra Zoom Ed front opening enclosure, and you throw an appropriate wattage light on it, maybe like a 50 watt or 25 watt, depending on how big it is and how warm the room is. Put some either a tall hide under there or something that it can climb on there, water bowl, and you can dress it up how you want. They'll use anything you give them. But the bigger the enclosure, the more clutter and visual barriers you want to put in. So those like flexible vine plants where you buy one and it's like 6 feet and it just bends
Yeah.
everywhere. Those are nice for filling up a lot of visual space, and babies, because they're lightweight, will climb on them. So you want that animal to feel like it's not being stared at from every angle. Like picture yourself as a little baby. It's vulnerable. It doesn't want to be seen by potential predators everywhere. So just however you accomplish that, whether it be with lots of cork verticals or sticks or vines or fake plants, live, fake, your preference. Just make sure they have a lot of security as babies. Babies grow confidence very quickly. So just for at least the initial, you want to do that. Um, Even if the breeder kept the baby in a tub, I find if you put them in a small glass rut with enough hides and stuff, they'll be okay. You're looking to accomplish a hot spot that is mid to upper 80s. 85 to 88 is great. If it's 89 and 90, that's okay.
Hmm.
Any lower, you're going to find that animal might regurgitate meals. not warm enough to digest perhaps. Especially if you're using a lamp overhead, you want to make sure it's not getting too cold at night during most of the year. And by too cold, I mean nothing below like, I don't know, 75 or so. Comfortable room temperature is usually good for most carpets. In the winter, you might find that you want to add some sort of belly heat or maybe a ceramic bowl just to keep that warmth in there at night. With the exception of Brettles and Diamonds that obviously love that cold during the winter.
Sure.
And then, yeah, any sort of water bowl, perching, plants, hides, however you want to set it, they're very amenable to keeper setup. And then the first thing I would say is, don't handle them for a couple days. Make sure you get a meal in them to demonstrate that they're comfortable and on task with, establishing themselves in the new enclosure. And once they've shown that they're comfortable, they're eating, they're pooping, game on. You usually won't have any issues at that point, and then you can size up the enclosure size as you see fit over time.
Gotcha. So that's, I think, the biggest thing that you hit on there was their security.
Yeah,
Right. So like it's having the temperatures is important. With certain species, having humidity is absolutely vital.
yeah,
And uh, but I think that security is something that a lot of people overlook. And what do you mean, like, so like visual barriers between you and the snake, right? So that.
yeah. So if that snake is sitting somewhere in the enclosure and
Mhm.
it were to look around 180 degrees, let's say, and it can be seen from all 180 degrees, and it doesn't have anything blocking that animal's view, it's going to feel a little bit exposed and maybe a bit vulnerable. So this comes from like my working with crocodilians in zoos, but they are very much visual barrier based animals, and they don't give you a lot of behavior, so you kind of have to read
Mm.
subtle things. And sometimes the visual barriers will change everything, and that could be as simple as putting a couple sticks or some branches and things so that that animal doesn't feel like it's just fully on display all the time. Like it feels like there's stuff visually in its way from being seen. If it's sitting here, it can't be seen from this angle, or this angle. So you want that animal to feel like it's got safe spots. And when we're talking about little baby carpet pythons, these things are going to be eaten by large skinks, monitors, like bearded dragons, frilled dragons, like you name it. Other snakes, they're on the menu. When they're little,
Yeah,
they're like
everything.
20, 25 grams. They're programmed to seek out safety and security. And oftentimes that's either in cracks in the ground, holes in hollowed out logs, somewhere where they're really secure and can't be seen. Um, so yeah, just you got to think of it from their perspective.
Yeah, that's good, and that's smart too, because like the long vines that you said you could fold up and put them in a tank.
Oh yeah,
They're great for that. But even if you had like the 99-cent store, the silk flowers, and I like the pet store vines too, because then I at least think that the it's pet safe plastic, which I don't know, that might be
sure.
an oxymoron in itself. But
Yeah.
just even those things which the animals, a brand new baby can climb on, but for the most part, even a bigger stuff is going to go right through. But it's just
Right.
that visual barrier that's nice to have too. So it's
Sure.
um, decorations. We all like stuff on our walls.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of play on that, and then once they get confident, once they're eating for you, then usually not much is going to trip them up. They're pretty confident snakes.
And then what about as like a pet? What should someone expect to keep them in as an adult? And not minimums, but what do you think that they someone can get away with, or what do you think the snake would really want, or be able to use really well?
I think if you want to do something creative, what's really kind of easy to, I wouldn't say easy, but there's a lot of available options to do without breaking the bank is repurposing like an armoire or a
Mm,
cabinet with glass front doors, because that will give you something that's already structured. Usually people are trying to get rid of them. Most of the hard work is done. You just want to make sure you've got perching, lighting, security, and that it isn't going to mold. So something like a clear coat liner in there, adding a couple fixtures, maybe some fans, if it, if it's pretty sealed up, opening, putting a screen on the side, and then you can kind of go crazy. So I know a lot of people that get creative with beautiful living room displays. They don't just want like a box sitting there. But if you want to buy a commercially available enclosure, a lot of companies will make things from 4x2x2s to 6x3s to, if you want to give them, you know, 6 feet or 4 feet of vertical space, go for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They will literally use every inch. Just know that when you go bigger, you have more airspace that you got to heat, and that's okay. You just either go with a bigger heat panel, or sometimes you do both an overhead and maybe a belly heat, and have just one kind of running all the time. Um, and all these variables you won't really know until you get them into the room you're doing, and you can sort of ballpark it and then you'll dial it in. Um, but yeah, these animals, an adult female, let's say an adult female carpet at 6.5 feet, 7 feet for a 10, 11-year-old, very successful, happy, well cared for individual. Shoot, give her something, 4 or 5 feet wide and go 4 or 5 feet tall and have fun, man. They'll literally use everything. They'll use every inch. But I would say a 4x2 would be a minimum for most big females. The Papuan females can stay a bit smaller regardless of how you feed them, but even still, like, they'll use every inch too. A large Papuan carpet female could still be 5.5, maybe 6 feet, and that's a good sizable animal.
Yeah, and it's fun to see too, to give them a big space. I always think of the carpet pythons, but a lot of snakes in that same size range. I really like the 4x2x4s.
Mm,
For if I was just someone that had like one cage in a room somewhere, and
sure.
that was something to fit. And in a lot of cases too, they're combinable too, so they could be 8x2
Yeah.
by 4. But I
Yeah.
think there's some really affordable options, and I think especially a carpet python is going to climb up a lot more. A ball python, I mean, 4 feet's not too tall for just about any snake, but
I've
uh,
seen ball pythons climb
yeah,
up 3.5 foot branches, no problem. Yeah.
yeah, that's nothing. But I really like that size. I always think of carpet pythons when I see it marketed anywhere. I always
Yeah.
think that
That's a
that's
perfect
kind of a
size.
great entry,
Yeah, I
right?
agree.
Yeah,
That could
give them
accommodate
place to go up and
everything.
down.
You could even cohabitate a pair in a 4x2x4, obviously just feed separately, but a pair could live comfortably year round and something like that. And you get to see some crazy cool behaviors out of them.
It's funny that you say that. I love keeping snakes together. It's so much more engaging, I think, and that you kind of got to make sure that it's someone that's been doing it before, and have someone that
Yeah,
you could ask for advice on it and stuff. But
sure.
it's because it can go wrong. But I don't know. It's funny because these conversations just couldn't have been had even a while ago. It seemed to be kind of like
Oh,
a
it's
death,
very taboo.
like a death mark, like
Yeah,
don't
it's very no.
cohabitation, like instantly. I'm like, I'm going to end the interview now.
Yep. Yep.
Riley just said put two carpet pythons together, but no, I agree. Like that's it's fun. Just don't let them eat at the same time in the
Yeah.
same place.
Yeah, that I feel like that should be common sense for any cohabitation for the most part. There are some animals that are, maybe the space is big enough where you watch them or whatever, but with pythons, they kind of get that mood. I've seen carpet pythons grab each other just thinking it's food. So, just feed them separately, give them the night, then put them back together. They're good.
Yeah, they just get a little bit of that bloodlust in them, and then they want to eat. They
It's
want to eat
and
everything.
accidents happen, they're in that zone, something moves right in front of them, they just react. It kind of
Yeah.
it's almost unintentional.
So that was a question I was going to ask for new carpet python keepers. Is it going to bite me? What do you said you don't care, and I think especially with a baby, understanding just how unimpactful their bite actually is.
Yeah.
It cannot be understated because there's still a lot of people that are very concerned about the bite from, like you said, a 25 gram animal. Like even when they get
Yeah.
shipped out, they're probably more like 40 grams.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, that's
It's pretty
uh,
insignificant. It'll definitely, on sensitive spots on your fingers
mhm.
just bleed a lot without much incident. it might draw little pinpricks of blood, but really it looks way worse than it ends up being, especially if you don't react and pull away. And it's very counterintuitive. Our sort of survival instincts, knee-jerk reaction are to avoid danger. Um, if you just sort of tell yourself, like, look, I'm gonna go into this snake's little bubble. It's a baby. It can't hurt me. It
Yeah.
it physically cannot hurt me.
Nope.
And you just kind of accept it and if you tell yourself, if it strikes for me, don't move, let it happen. And if you can get through that and sort of calculatedly and in certain circumstances remove that reflex with babies, it's good to have with adults. Don't let adults bite you. But you'll do a couple things. You'll get over a fear of getting bit. Oftentimes, I find that's usually how babies will stop biting is they'll realize it's kind of inconsequential for the couple weeks that they try, and then they just realize he's still picking me up and cleaning and putting me back, and nothing I do is stopping him. And I try to be delicate and gentle and beware of what stimuli sets them off, but some babies are just going to do that, and they'll grow out of it. And the more exposure they get to you, they'll certainly learn to trust you. I don't shame anybody for using a hook or gloves, whatever helps you get over that mental hurdle of
Hmm.
sort of putting yourself in harm's way, quote unquote. That's what your brain thinks you're doing when you just put your hand in front of that snake. They'll learn that you're trusting you or you're trusting them, and they'll start to sort of extend that trust. But I will say this: after dark, after lights out, they're awake and they're hunting. Even the friendliest carpet python is liable to bite you, and figure that out afterwards.
Mm.
Um, it's just it's a good rule of thumb. Soon as it's like 6:30, 7:30, lights are out, you'll you'll get a different animal. So it's always good to approach them a little bit more cautiously at that time, have a hook, get them out of the enclosure, then they're going to usually turn off. But they're nocturnal hunters, and so if you just go in sort of cowboy in, chances are they'll remind you after dark.
Well, yeah, and snakes got to remind us to slow down too, because uh, it, I like to think of them. I saw the equivalent somewhere, but it was something along the lines of basically like 1/20th of our speed. They need, like 1/20th the amount of resources we do over the same period of time, just because we're warm-blooded animals. And
Hmm.
let's just say, for argument's sake, that I made that number completely up. Uh, but uh, but it's the same thing. I look at it the same way with their speed. If someone came into the room with me at 20 times normal speed, my first reaction is like, fight, freak out, whatever it is.
Yeah,
It's fight or flight, until I can assess, like, oh, this is just someone who lives with me, like we're totally
yeah,
safe, it's not a big
yeah,
deal.
yeah.
Been here 100 times and they're just changing the water. But so it's kind of the same thing with the snake. Like, even though you might take your time and you might pull the tub out gently and slow like that, to the snake it's still, the world is really moving quickly.
Yeah.
And the processing power, we all, we love our snakes, but they're not the smartest class of animals on the planet. The
No.
processing power, like they could get there, and it's really neat to see these animals that have been on the planet for millions and millions of years, hundreds of millions. But the processing power is just, it's slow. But when it gets there, it gets it. So I don't know. That's, I think, another reminder too, is like you said, yeah, put yourself in the baby shoes and just imagine,
Yeah.
everything's trying to get you. So you also said, you just told yourself these things cannot hurt me, and I think that was probably the best thing
Hmm.
that I've had to do when I worked at a facility where I do education with some animals. And it'd be a monitor lizard or an iguana or various different pythons and things that I maybe haven't handled before, never seen a snake that big before, or anything. And I just had to tell myself, it cannot hurt me. And there'd be some that I try and let. I also recommend that everyone try and let a snake bite them. I know that's kind of controversial, but
Oh no, I fully agree.
the
I
the
fully
the
agree.
the best part about it too is you say it, you go in saying it can't hurt me, so not like, oh
It's not a
no, I'm
surprise.
scared, this is a crazy thing. It's not crazy, it's easy, it's go in relaxed.
Yeah.
But the reason why I say it is too, because a lot of times when you do it and you go in with that attitude, you take it, most of the time, because you're going so slow and you're taking the time to think and be so deliberate about your actions, the snake is like, what? I'm not worried about this. And then they
Yeah,
never
they
bite. So
usually
every
don't
time,
bite.
yeah, every time I've tried to do it, and that's why I
Yeah.
recommend everyone try it. Because every time I've tried to get bit by a snake, it's like, oh, it didn't do it. And I think about it, it's just because I was very deliberate and they picked up on that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're thinking animals. We just have to sort of figure out how they're thinking and at what speed. You bring up a great point, their speed. And sometimes we just need to slow down because you've got animals that will just react, and that's very instinctual and hardwired into them based on their species, natural history, etc., age, stimuli. And soon as you allow them to go through the motions of assessing all of the stimulus that is causing that reaction, usually it just takes a couple minutes, and you'll get a different set of behaviors out of that animal, more curiosity and more of a thinking mode. Um, there's always the exception. I've got a few that they love to stay on defense, on guard.
Hmm.
They're just hyper aware of the fact that they are not in their safe space and that there is a big hairless, warm-blooded thing that it has them by the tail or whatever, and they just will not let that go. It's a very small percentage of them, um, and that's just kind of how it goes. I did this past season. I took every clutch that hatched, and instead of instantly separating babies in their own bins and sexing and weighing and IDing them right off the rip, what I did was I let them all hatch out and I just put them in a group tub
Yeah.
and let them stay together as a big sort of pre-shed mass for about 2 weeks until they all shed out, and then separated them. And I did this to see if that 2 weeks of contact with other clutch mates and stimuli and stuff around them, sort of touching them on a daily basis, would result in calmer behavior, because I was getting across the board just really feisty, angsty
Mm.
offspring that didn't grow out of it at year one and didn't grow out of it at year two. And, took customers a lot of time to really like handle them through it. And I have some that are still at 3 years old, just absolute psychos, that I just separated from birth. And so, like, I would say 75% of them, when I would just separate them from birth, just became irascible, really high strung, sort of defensive animals for the first couple of years. This year, the across the board, I would say like 90% of the offspring are much more confident, much more relaxed, not as responsive to stimuli, and I've got very few psycho defensive babies. And I also had a much better time feeding my albino Darwin clutch this go around. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, um, but there is definitely something, at least anecdotal, to giving them
Sure.
those 2 weeks be when they're in their first shed cycle to be with clutch mates, with other animals that are sort of oddly innately familiar and trustworthy, even though they're just experiencing life together at the same time. And maybe it's just that touching, or maybe a few of them are striking, and then they set them off, and they're like, okay, I don't like doing that, because then everybody starts biting, or whatever that thought process is for them in that 2 weeks. I noticed a profound difference in all of my offspring.
Oh
So
wow. So like that's some early childhood development psychology going on there.
yeah, I guess so. Separated at birth equals angry python babies.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there was there's literature on this in ball pythons too, and about them seeming to prefer to share resources with clutch mates too. So that's fascinating. And you
I
said a
believe it.
profound distance, a
Oh
difference.
yeah. Oh, night and day. Like, it was noticeable. So let's see. This past season, I did it with every single clutch, and that was like 8 or 9 clutches. The season before, I separated every single baby immediately, and it was probably the same amount of clutches, 8 or 9 clutches. So similar sample size, over 100 babies each season. And I would say the 2024 babies were absolutely defensive. I still have a good number of them, and I get bit by them on the regular.
Right.
Whereas the offspring from this past season, it's very few,
They're much
very few.
easier.
Oh yes, night and day, and day.
And these are good questions. These are I love that you put that out there. I think that that's a great way to separate, just different things and info for new breeders to pick up on and make better
Yeah,
pets.
yeah. I mean, exactly. Make better pets. That was my number one goal because, like, yeah, I can sit here and say I'll produce over 100 babies and they're all biting me and I'll just deal with it like it's whatever. But that turns people off that are looking for a
Sure,
pet. And half of, if not more than half of the people looking to me for snakes are looking for a pet, something that their kids can handle. Some of them are looking to breed down the line, and some of them are understanding of how baby snakes are. But I can't tell you how many carpet pythons I've put in first time snake keeper homes in the past 2 years, and it's important to them. So it's important to me. And I'm just really kind of paying attention to random things that I don't think necessarily matter, but I'm curious. And that was just one of those things where I just had a light bulb moment. I was like, I'm sure I'm not the first person to discover this, but
sure.
um, it
But
was very noticeable and apparent to me.
and I know people have talked about it, but it's been anecdotal, and you can put it, 24 versus 25. You got the data from a control group, and well, it's more or less.
Loosely, yeah,
Yeah, close enough. Um, so it's obviously this isn't publication either, but talking about it, and I know you mentioned that on your channel as well. Like
hmm
it's interesting. I think it's great info to get out there because
yeah,
uh, people I think are going to see it across species and that sort of thing as well too. So you never know what info you could use to solve a
sure.
problem.
I
Yeah,
mean, who knows? It could literally be the variable that makes the difference between a difficult to get started established feeding species,
yeah.
like for all we know, I don't know, insert rare colubrid species here or whatever that like that could be a change. Who knows? It's worth exploring as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I love it. What and you talked to too about someone who might be interested in buying snakes to breed down the line. What advice would you give to someone who says, they don't have any snakes, but they're looking to get into it to be a hobbyist breeder? There's someone that I think I might want to breed my snakes together, but I've got maybe three, maybe five. I'm that, just a few snakes.
Yeah, I would say if you can hold off on purchasing for like 6 months and hold yourself to researching as many species as humanly possible in whatever free time you can over that amount of time, whether it be just YouTube exposure, going to shows, seeing them, going to other people's collections, seeing them, getting your hands on them, expose yourself to as much as possible and be honest with yourself about what you do and don't like about these species that you're experiencing. You'll find out pretty quickly which species are not the right fit for you, and
Mm,
you'll avoid making some mistakes. And by mistakes, I mean purchasing animals that aren't the right fit, and then you end up having to move them on later on, which is totally fine in the exploration process. But if you've sort of done sort of that like pause and research bit in terms of like get your hands on baby and adult corn snakes, get your hands on baby and adult hognose, get your hands on baby and adult boas, and like sort of go down the line and explore some of these species and be honest with yourself. Do you like, locality stuff? Do you like bigger stuff? Do you like smaller stuff? Do you want stuff that needs to be put down for the winter? Do you want more equatorial stuff, arboreal stuff, stuff that doesn't eat a lot, stuff that, is frog or lizard special? Like, soon as you start asking these questions, you'll realize, like, oh, that seems like a lot of work, or yeah, I'm fair game for that, or this really intrigues me, or I find this region of species fascinating for this, whatever. You'll start whittling down what your interests are. And I think ultimately what I'm trying to say is be honest with yourself and choose the species that you love the most,
mm,
because anything else you're just going to be compromising. You're still going to be chasing whatever it is you really truly want. And sometimes it takes time to figure out what that is. And sometimes you'll find something that you've always wanted and it isn't the right fit. So don't kid yourself. If you like wanted 100 flower rat snakes and they just don't fit in your, in your your situation, but something like black rat snakes do, or king snakes, or whatever it is. Like, just be honest with yourself and go with what you love and what works for you. And just, if your goal is to be a breeder and make a name for yourself, leave your stamp, leave a legacy behind, do something that you love, that you're going to enjoy doing for those 25, 30 years, or whatever it takes for you to become the OG that the entire world sees, because you're not going to really know it's happening until it's already done. And you owe it to yourself, once time's passed, because you can't get it back, to just do what you love instead of chasing somebody else's goal because you think
Mm.
that's the standard, or that's what it means to be successful. Like, it's okay to look at those folks as great role models and examples and a bouncing off point, and certainly get your hands on those species, because you might find something that's innately very abundant and common is your jam. Just do that in your own unique way.
Yeah,
uh,
sure.
just because it's common doesn't mean every angle of it has been done. And uh and there's enough room for everybody in there. So I would say, yeah, long story short, be true to yourself, find the species of the animal or the project that really gets your gears turning, and just go all in on that.
But I think you brought up a great point right before that too, is go all in, but take your time to get
Yeah,
there too, right? Like,
yeah.
so I think that's a lesson that I think everyone, that once you reach sort of that midlife crisis age, you realize just how much you rushed into everything
Hmm.
when you were a young
In my
man.
early 20s.
Yeah, and so like that's, I think, always such great advice, is just take a moment. Like, 6 months is not a long time if you want this to be a financial thing. If you're the type of person who says, hey, I love that snake, it's beautiful, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it right now, I'm going to love it forever, and you know you're going to do it, commit to it, get it,
Yeah,
and keep that animal for 20 years. But if you're thinking, I want to be the next Garrett Hartle, or even Riley's Reptiles, um, great, awesome, but just remember that they got to take step one first.
yeah,
I simply couldn't get to where you're at in a matter of 2 to 3 years. It would take a good 5 to 10, like, like, at least. And even then, it's a matter of putting in the work. So I think that's so great, is just do the research, and let your passion lead you too, because that's another thing. If you jump into something and it turns out you're not as serious as maybe you thought you were going to be, or it wasn't as realistic, you hate to, I don't know, waste time, and kind of exploit these animals, because we all kind of do in a little bit. And we
yep,
kind of want to limit that as much as possible, because they are, at the
yeah,
end of the day,
yeah.
a living, breathing animal, right? So
Yeah, if you're going to be taming down a bitey snake and picking up poop and sacrificing long nights and some of your paycheck and holidays, and you better love doing it. You owe
mm,
it to yourself and the animals first to really love doing it. Because at the end of the day, if you don't, it's just gonna your care is gonna show. And yeah, the other thing too is, like, it's a blessing that we have such access to see and learn and research and see other people's experiences and approaches with all these other species to figure it out. But it's also really easy to forget that, a lot of those people, like Garrett, have grown into that position. They didn't
mhm.
go into that position. They spent their whole life doing everything that's led them to that point. Um, and it's the same with any business. You don't go into business, you grow into business. And so it's the same thing with this. Like, even if you're not trying to make it a business, you just want to make it a hobby, grow into it. Take your baby steps,
Yeah.
crawl before you run, like, learn. It's okay. It's okay to do things like the beginner way at first. That's how we learn. That's exactly how you learn. And there's no better teacher than experience. So I think, yeah, I think that's the way to do it.
I think that I love that. I think that's a perfect segue right into the next question. So, coming right to the end here, and sort of kind of free thinking in the same direction. Tell me something you've learned about carpet pythons recently.
Hmm. Something I've learned about them recently. Um, Man, I would say recent as in, let's say, the last couple of
Whatever comes to
years.
mind. Yeah,
I
yeah.
would say over the last few years recently, I would say less is more has been the biggest sort of eye-opening thing. And I don't necessarily apply that to everything. Like it's always good to do more water changes than less. It's always good to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
more spot cleaning than less. Um, but a lot of the dogma and things that like I came up learning, whether it from Facebook or just whatever I heard, is all backwards. Like less is more, not in space. They're great with space. Give them as much space as you can. They're going to use it. But food and heat, like a little less on the heat. Over the last 20 years, the carpet python community started like, you got to keep things 95 hot spot and
Oh
85
yeah.
degree ambient and all this nonsense. And diamond pythons didn't make it to three because they were just burning the candle at both ends. And now, most people understand that you can give the majority of carpet pythons a hot spot between like 86 and 88, give them night drops year round, give them a winter, all these different things, feed them less, like they don't need to eat just because they're pacing and will happily eat 24/7. Like it doesn't
It
mean they should, like
is a
I,
python.
it is a python at the end of the day. And whether it's, a young one or a 15-year-old veteran, like sometimes less is more in the heat and the food because you're going to get more out of them in the long run. I definitely have animals in my past that I wish I could have back that
Mhm.
I definitely affected their lifespan with my lack of experience and, you know, overfeeding,
Mm.
overheating, overfeeding, just basically running them like a car going 100 miles an hour nonstop. And yeah, the battery wears out eventually. So you learn that one the hard way. But
So let
I'm
them go
I'm
slow.
Yeah, yeah, don't they don't need to be hot all the dang time just because it's Australia doesn't mean it's the surface of the sun. Um, go a little bit cooler on the hot spot and then at night let it go a few degrees cooler. Like it's okay. And then, within reason, the winter time, let them get cold. Don't feed them. It's okay. As long as it warms up during the day and they're not getting too cold. Like popcorn carpets don't do well below 70, 72. So
Mhm.
if you know that, the rest of them kind of fall in line. Brettles pythons, diamond pythons, heck, even inlands. I don't care what temperature it is at night. Turn that heat off. As long as it comes back on during the day, they're going to be just fine. And that's
Mhm.
also the key to getting some of those species to breed. But what I've found is that it slows their growth rate just a little bit. They still will hit 4 or 5 years old and be around the same size. But I found they've done it in little spurts and chunks. They get the winter off, and I've got 14, 15-year-old animals that are lean, mean, and still breeding. Whereas the previous way I used to feed, I don't think I have a single animal from the way I used to feed, and I don't think any of them made it to 11.
Right.
So it's just the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, that's the evidence is there for you. I like that. What and then going back, turning the clocks even back further. What is something you wish you would have known before you ever got your first snake or your first carpet python?
Oh, what would I wish I would have had the foresight and the wisdom beyond my years to know that what's abundant and affordable and available right now might not be so in the future. So get it while you can.
Mm.
Jeez, don't break the lights. Don't do that. Hold on, I've got a snake climbing up a little. I thought I put brackets. Ah, nighttime. Don't do this. No, don't break it. Go forward. It's fine. Oh, I'm gonna have to redo that. You're rude. You give them nice things, and here, great example. Less is more. I tried to give them lights. Nope. He just ruins them.
Oh my gosh.
Um, Sorry about that. What were you saying?
That's okay. You were saying before you got your first carpet python,
Yeah. Okay. Right. I wish I would have had the maturity and
the
foresight to know
foresight.
that the foresight to know that what is available and affordable and abundant now might not be in 5 or even 10 years. So if you
Mm,
think that there's a chance you're going to be into that, get them now. Like make the sacrifice, put your other plans on pause. And specifically, I was so wrapped up in tiger coastal carpets in this morph that I should have known was going to be around forever. But I was like so focused on that that I couldn't even pay attention to the fact that I had backdoor access to Gary Via line diamond pythons through my mentor, like better than anybody else. And I could have started with diamonds a long, long time ago, and it would have been a very different trajectory. So what? Yeah, shoulda, woulda, coulda, right?
oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. Kind of started to get into a little pat. Not what do you regret, Riley? What do you wish you would have known? But
What
no,
I
that's
wish I would
good.
have known.
That's good though,
Yeah,
because it is that same thing. It's take the time, and you can't predict the future. So obviously
no.
that's kind of crazy. But if you take, I think that's great advice, and it's been sort of a thing that you've come back to a lot.
Hmm.
Was to just take a moment and go slow. And
Yeah.
I think that's and think about what you're doing. Be deliberate, right? And I think
Yes.
that's definitely a lesson I'm going to take away from this. So
Yeah.
um, I really appreciate it, and also really appreciate you always remind me. One for you coming on the channel, but you whenever I watch your videos, it always reminds me because you always do such a wonderful job of promoting USARK. So I wanted to make sure that we said the same thing here too, because like you said,
Yeah.
they're really the only ones out there looking out for us. Um,
It's
and
true.
I'm all for when people say they want more for USARC, or they want it to represent more, and that may be the case. But I also absolutely am stoked that there's not a legislative body, a lobbyist group that is able to represent us and make sure that we get to do this, because a lot of these animals go across state lines and that sort of things, and uh,
Absolutely.
it's constantly under attack, and they do a wonderful job for us. So
Yeah.
um, there's always links in these descriptions for that too, and I know you always promote it, so thank you for that. It's always good to be a member. Anything else you
Absolutely.
want to throw out before we say goodnight?
Just, read some books, explore.
Mm,
We're in a golden age of reptiles right now, and if you blink, you might miss it. I think we're seriously in an unprecedented time. Like we can read all the Lizard King and Stolen World books and stuff and look back in the 80s and 90s and think that was the golden era. No, 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 no. I think we're in a renaissance of a very big golden age of reptiles right now. So be present in the moment, enjoy it, but think about the future and think about, what may or may not be, and just have as much fun as humanly possible.
absolutely, I love it. Thank you, Riley.
Thank you.